Today on Capechi's Corner, we're going to look at square root functions and inequalities. So what is a square root function? It's basically just a function that contains a square root, which is a type of a radical function. So if we first start and we look at this parent function right here, just kind of the normal, right, where we're starting from as a parent function, this is what the graph looks like. And it does make sense. Like underneath this radical sign, right, my radicand, that has to be greater than or equal to 0, which is why it is above my x-axis there. And because of that, my range is also, in this particular case, in my parent function, has to be greater than or equal to 0 as well. Okay, so let's just get started before we graph. Let's just get started and look at some domain and ranges for each of the functions. So just remember that when I'm finding the domain, underneath the radical sign, that has to be greater than or equal to 0. So I'm going to set that greater than or equal to 0. So x has to be greater than or equal to 3. So that's my domain. Domain is going to be such that x is greater than or equal to 3. Okay, now because of that, once I get that, I know that I don't have anything outside my radical sign, so that I know that my range is going to be f of x. Remember, that's the same as y, such that f of x is also going to have to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, let's look at the next one. So here I know that I have x minus 4 has to be greater than or equal to 0. So x has to be greater than or equal to 4. So my domain is going to be listed as x such that x is greater than or equal to 4. Now what happens if we're going to graph this? Whatever I get here, let's say that's 0, I'm still going to have this 2 out front. I'm going to have to add 2 to that. So my range is going to be f of x such that f of x has to be greater than or equal to 2. That's going to be my lowest value for my f of x or my y. Okay, let's look at one more. So again, my domain right here, x plus 5 is greater than or equal to 0. So x is going to be greater than or equal to negative 5. So my domain, x such that x has to be greater than or equal to negative 5. Now my range is going to be a little bit different this time. Okay, so I have this negative 6 outside, right? So that's going to be important here. And that negative there. So if I were to graph this, and we'll kind of just see this in a little bit, I'm going to shift this down to negative 6. But on top of it, because of that negative sign in front, I'm going to have to change my sign there. So f of x such that f of x is going to be less than or equal to negative 6. Okay, so it's just kind of the basics. We're going to need all of that when we get to graph. Now, with parent functions, we've done all kinds of shifting before. So here is basically the equation for the function, and we have vertical and horizontal and vertical translations, and we talk about the shapes. I think it's just as easy just to make a table, but I mean, it definitely, if you like to use that and you prefer to use that, you can take a look at all of that. Okay. All right. So identify number 4. Identify the domain and the range of the given functions, then graph them. All right, so what's going to happen here? Again, I need to find the domain because that's where I'm going to start. So I know that x minus 2 is going to be greater than or equal to 0. So x is going to be greater than or equal to 2. Now, you don't have to necessarily do this part every time if you kind of see what's going on. So x such that x is greater than or equal to 2. So that means that 2 is going to be my lowest x value. Okay, so I'm going to put that in my table. And I'm just going to fill the table out. I substitute that in, then y is going to be the 5. And so this right here is going to dictate what my range is as well. So f of x such that f of x has to be greater than or equal to 5, because if this is the lowest value that my x can be, then this has to be the lowest value that my y can be. Okay, I'll pick some other points that are easy to work with, substitute them in. Again, if you want to pause the video and do that, you can. And then I'll graph it. So I have 2, 5 as a point, and then I have 6, 7 is here, and then 11/8 is going to be somewhere up here. So I know that my graph is going in that direction. Okay, so if you kind of take a look back now at our domain and range. So again, I started at my 2, right? That's my starting point. And then my f of x is greater or equal to 5. Again, that's my starting point right there. All right, let's look at another one. This time I use y instead of f of x. It's the same thing, right? We know that they're interchangeable. So I just have to be careful when I write my range. So I know from previous looking at that, I know that my domain is going to be x such that x is greater than or equal to -3. So I'm going to put that in right away. When I substitute that in, I get my y is less than 1. I'm sorry, that my y value is going to be -1. Now, this negative is going to be a little tricky up front too, so we're going to kind of hold off on the domain for now just to see what happens. I'm going to substitute in some more values, and then I'm going to graph, and I'm going to see what happens. So I have -3, -1 is going to be here. 1, -5 goes here. And then 3, -5.9 is going to be somewhere in here, right? And then I'll draw my graph. There's my starting point there. Now, because I have that negative sign up front of my 2, I am now below that x-axis. So my range is going to be y, such that y is going to be less than or equal to -1. So here is my starting point, but instead of going above and kind of doing an arc this way, that negative sign, when I fill in my values, is making it go below the x-axis.
Now we're going to switch from an equation to an inequality. So you previously did an equation that was the same as number 6, except for now I just changed that to an inequality sign. So I have already plotted the points because you're going to do that in a similar fashion. The difference here is we have a less than symbol. So a couple things about the less than symbol. That means it's going to be dashed and it's going to be an open circle. So you can see here actually I need to change that to an open circle there. And then I have plotted my points and the line is dashed. Now, the fact that it's less than, remember less than or equal, we're going to shade below. So what that looks like is I'm going to send this all the way down here, and then I'm going to shade below that graph. Now, if it was a greater than or equal to, we would shade up here. Also, if I had a less than or equal sign or a greater than or equal to sign, this open circle would be a closed circle. And that's it. Thanks so much for stopping by. Have a great day.